Hey, pirate fans around the world. This is No GPS, No Problem. How pirates navigated the void. No GPS, no radio, pirates rid stars, swells, birds and stolen charts to turn a blank ocean into a road. The promise is simple and strong. This story reveals the full toolkit pirates used to cross oceans without modern devices, dead reckoning, star sights, the reading of wind and current, stolen maps, and captured pilots, and shows how those methods work together in real raids and escapes. The driving question is clear. How did crews find targets and slip away across open water with no electronics? And why did these low-tech methods work often enough to scare empires? The stakes were life-sized. One wrong estimate meant reefs, capture or starvation. One correct landfall meant prize money and survival. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy and want to fall asleep with pirate stories whenever you want. Quick fact: a knotted cord dragged astern could measure a ship's speed when timed with a sand glass. Quick fact: a wooden board with holes and little pegs. The traverse board saved the ship's memory by recording course and speed every half hour. Quick fact: when the sun climbed to its highest point each day, measuring its height above the horizon gave a ship's latitude. Quick fact: birds, watercolor and floating weed advertised land long before land itself appeared. Quick fact: stolen charts and forced pilots were sometimes more valuable than cannon. 2 guiding questions. Steer the hour ahead. What could pirates actually see, measure and memorize on a featureless sea? And how did rough tools, sharp observation, and human discipline combine to outthink better armed navies? By the end, a full navigation day will be rebuilt from the deck up, and a chase and escape will be tracked with methods that are older than most nations. Picture a sea chest opened near the helm. Inside, a small but serious collection of tools. A magnetic compass, practical and worn. Its cards steady enough in calm and trembling. A little when the ship shivers. A traverse board, round and simple, with peg holes arranged in rings. Each ring marks a half hour of the watch, and pegs show the course steered and the speed made. There is a log line, a long cord knotted at measured intervals, and attached to a wooden chip shaped like a slice of a circle. When the chip is thrown astern and the line pays out, the number of knots passing a sailor's fingers during one turn of the sandglass converts to knots of speed. There is a lead line for soundings, a marked rope with a heavy lead at its end. The bottom of the lead is cupped and packed with tallow, so it can bring up a sample of the seabed. White sand, shell, soft mud. There are chalk, slates and candles, because ink runs and paper blows, but chalk stays and slate forgives a wave. There are small tables copied by hand or cribbed from a pilot's book. The kit looks humble, and yet it empowers the main method that carried ships through centuries: dead reckoning. Dead reckoning can be said in plain words. Start from a known position. Keep track of the direction steered. Keep track of the speed made. Add time. Then draw or imagine the new position. The beauty of the method lies in its steady, continuous nature. It does not ask the stars for help at every moment. It asks for discipline. The master or pilot estimates a starting point, perhaps the mouth of a known harbor or the last sighted headland. At each half-hour glass, a sailor at the helm calls out the course. The petty officer at the board places a peg in the hole that corresponds to that course and places another peg for speed. Tally the pegs at the end of a watch, and the ship's estimated run can be laid down on a chart or on a slate. So many miles on such and such heading. Errors creep in, as they always do. The wind pushes, the current sets, the helmsman steers a hair wide of the mark. The speed was guessed a little high or low, yet experience corrects drift. The wake against the quarter shows a set. The feel of the helm tells a bias. After hours, a watch officer adjusts the reckoning, shaving off a mile here, adding there, because the sea whispers its corrections to those who watch. Dead reckoning shines where pirates often worked. among islands, along coasts, and on night moves toward targets. Short hops mean small errors. Landmarks allow resets. A cutter slipping from a mangrove inlet to a leeward bay can carry a fresh DR from the last known point. Check with a lead line near the coast, and stay out of sight. On long blue water legs, DR becomes risky, because small errors add up. That is why other methods, celestial sights at noon, reading swells and currents, and collecting signs of land, were blended into the reckoning like spices into a stew. A single day shows the rhythm. At dawn, the helmsman watches the wind, and the officer of the deck notes the ship's head. The glass turns, the pegs advance, the log is hove to check speed. After breakfast, a hand cleans the tallow on the lead and repacks it for a cautious approach later. As the sun climbs, the master begins to watch for local noon to check latitude. By late afternoon, the DR track is compared with the feel of the swells and the color of the water. At night, the pattern continues under stars. None of this is dramatic. All of it is decisive. Reading the living ocean is a skill set that thrives without books. Swell sets, the long, low heaves generated by distant winds, travel like invisible roads. Wind waves, short and choppy, ride on top and can be at angles to the swells below. A trained eye can separate the two and sense a prevailing direction. Cross seas show up where two swell systems meet at angles, a sign of storm belts and far-off weather that can tell a navigator whether the ship has crossed into a different regime. Water color is a quiet clue. The clear, deep blue of oceanic water shifts to a greenish cast near continental shelves, and the pale jade of shoals warns of danger. Suspended silt clouds the sea near river mouths and deltas. Some sailors say the smell of land carries on damp air before sight does. Fish oils, plants, and earth mingle in ways that noses notice. Floating seaweed, sargassum, collects along lines that show where currents meet. Birds speak too. Frigate birds, terns and boobies forage near land or around shoals. Their patterns rise and fall with daylight. When flights head shoreward at dusk, the direction of land is written in the sky. Cloud islands form over warm land in the afternoon heat, tall and white. Near banks and shelves, soundings become a kind of map. The lead line calls out depth numbers that change in a distinctive way as a ship approaches a known bank. The sea is a book of hints, and those hints pair beautifully with celestial checks to reset the dead reckoning clock. Latitude was attainable before longitude because the sky gives away north-south position in two very friendly ways. One is the pole star in northern waters. The height of Polaris above the horizon closely matches the ship's latitude. The other is the sun at local noon, when the sun reaches its highest point for the day, measuring its altitude above the horizon and correcting for the date yields a latitude. Longitude is harder without a precise timekeeper because it depends on east-west rotation and exact time differences. Pirates sailing in the 17th and early 18th centuries lived in the pre-chronometer world. For them, latitude lines were lanes. Longitude was an estimate improved by experience, coastal features and pilot books. But even a rough latitude, kept steady across days, kept a ship running along the right lane for island chains and for the steady river of wind called the trades. Simple instruments did big work. The crossstaff was a yard-like rod with a sliding crosspiece. Hold one end to the eye, slide the crosspiece until its lower edge sits on the horizon and its upper edge touches the sun's lower limb, and read an angle. The drawback: the observer had to stare near the sun, which is not pleasant. The backstaff, a later refinement, allowed the observer to stand with back to the sun and sight the shadow of a vane onto a scale, a safer and steadier approach. Quadrants and early octants measured angles with a plumb bob or a reflected image. The old mariner's astrolabe, heavy brass rings with a rotating alidide, could be used in a blow because weight steadied it, but it was not delicate. In pirate hands, these tools rarely made astronomers proud, but they did what was needed. They gave numbers good enough to keep latitude between the guardrails. Wood warped in humidity brass corroded in salt air, and the motion of a deck added mischief. Sailors learned workarounds, take several sights and average them, avoid the worst roll by choosing a moment in the swell's slow rhythm, shade the instrument to see the sun's edge cleanly, run a quick correction for the sun's semi-diameter, and for the dip of the horizon, as seen from a height above sea level. The tone of this craft is not heroic, it is patient. A calm walk through a noon sight looks like this. The observer watches the sun rise toward its daily peak. With instrument ready, readings begin a bit before the suspected local noon, and continue as the sun climbs. The numbers increase. At some point, the climb pauses. The next minute's reading is the same as the last. Then, slowly, the readings decrease. The maximum is noted. That maximum altitude corrected for the day's solar declination, how far the sun is north or south of the celestial equator on that date, converts to latitude. No equations need to be shouted on deck. An experienced master carries a table or has the steps memorized. The result is carried back to the dead reckoning plot to remove north-south error. If the ship has been wandering off the intended latitude, it is brought back with care. The method does not fix longitude, but it sharpens one axis of the position and reduces the guesswork of landfall later in the week. Time at sea was organized with sand glasses and bells. The half-hour glass turned a ship into a metronome. Every time the glass emptied, a bell struck the count of half-hours into a watch. 1 bell, 2, up to 8, and then the count reset. The crew changed watches on that rhythm. The log line for speed depended on the same measured interval. A sailor counted knots, sliding through the fingers during the glass's run. That count was speed in nautical miles per hour. By design, the time was far from perfect. Glasses could run a little fast or slow. They had to be reset by guesswork each day. Yet for dead reckoning and for shipboard routine, this imperfect time was good enough. It is the very bluntness of the tool that suits the sea. Precision beyond the environment's stability is wasted. Until accurate marine chronometers became common, longitude remained a creature of estimate, corrected by coastal features or by lucky celestial events like lunar eclipses or the method of lunar distances used by the best trained navigators. Pirates generally did not have those refinements. They had pace, practice, and nerve. Charts were treasure. Portolan charts, born in the Mediterranean, showed coastlines with surprising accuracy and were laced with compass roses, spitting rumblines in all directions. In Atlantic and Indian Ocean waters, charts grew out of pilot books and logs, mixing careful observation with rumor. Copying was common. A crew might bring a chart to a tavern, and over lantern light, a clever hand would make a passable twin. Updates were penciled in less formally. A bar in a river mouth shifts. A sketch adds a warning. A captor opening a captured pilot's chest might find a pilot book packed with sailing directions, bearings from one headland to another, soundings at the approach to a bay, landmarks to look for at dawn. Such a book could decide a raid before it began. A Navy ship might have better guns, but a pirate crew with the right page could appear where it was least expected. The advantage was not technology, it was intelligent pilotage. The art of approaching land safely favored patience over drama. A ship nearing a shore would creep and feel. The lid line went over the side at intervals. A hand called soundings. So many fathoms, then fewer. The tallow on the lid told the seabed's texture. And for some harbors that texture was a signature that said, in effect, this is the right channel. Landmarks helped a church steeple lined up with a hill. A clump of palms lined with a rocky point. A hand bearing a compass took a bearing to one landmark, and then another, forming a cross bearing that placed the ship. Fog made all of this harder. Night demanded extra caution, speed reduced, extra soundings, and the listening ear engaged. The aim was not to show brilliance. The aim was to arrive tomorrow. Currents and drift entered the story wherever the sea set a ship sideways. The Gulf Stream and the Atlantic, swift and warm, could steal miles eastward from a ship that pretended it did not exist. The Agulas, current off southern Africa, could shove vessels where they did not plan to go and add teeth to waves when wind opposed it. Trade winds blew in belts, steady enough to be names rather than weather reports. Monsoon winds reversed on a schedule that turned seasons into calendars. Pirates used these flows like conveyor belts and avoided hostile ones near capes and banks. The wake told tales. If it curled odd against the rudder, a set was at work. Bubbles from the bow moved not straight aft but sideways past the quarter. The helmsman felt the need to keep nudging the wheel to hold a heading, which meant the ship was fighting a push. All of this rolled into the dead reckoning updates. No instrument needed beyond attention and humility. In the Caribbean, an island-hopping playbook emerged from practice. Preferred lanes threaded the Antilles with wind and current in mind. Reefs and keys, deadly to strangers, became shields for locals. A vessel that drew little water could sail where a pursuer dared not. Mangrove mazes offered routes invisible to a deep-drafted man-of-war. Anchorages behind elbows of land hid ships from common tracks. Careening sites, quiet beaches with high tides, doubled as repair yards. Watering places, woodlots, and food markets aligned with seamanship needs. Fill casks, patch sails, mend cordage, then vanish along a line of small islands. A frigate might chase a pirate down a clear channel. The pirate, knowing a cut through corals by soundings and color, would cross a shoal with a hand in the chains, call out by the Mark V, and grin when the pursuer backed off. These were not tricks, they were local knowledge deployed in motion. In the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, the wind itself drew a schedule. Monsoon piracy routes relied on the seasonal reversal. A crew could wait for the wind to turn, and then ride it toward a choke point. Bab el-Mandeb, for instance, where shipping had to pass. Capturing a local pilot could be more productive than firing a broadside. A dock captain knew where the water shoaled and where safe shelter lay under certain winds. Reading doku routes, hugging coasts when the monsoon pressed hard, then jumping offshore when the sea lay down. These choices were navigation in the key of time. The Indian Ocean has its own color and smell, and crews learned to treat its moods with respect. The logic was identical to the Caribbean. Observe, plan, move when the sea allows. Weathercraft gave navigation its safety margins. Clouds foretold more than rain. High mares' tails hinted at wind coming from a distance. Dark anvils warned of squalls embedded in trades. A line of low clouds crouched over warm land in the afternoon heat suggested a sea breeze that might build near dusk. In the pre-barometer days, some officers watched how the sea's surface looked along the horizon, the cat's paws of light gusts or the long glassy tongues of calm, while others tracked how the ship's smells changed and how the rigging sang. Decisions followed simple maxims learned the hard way. Reef early rather than late. Running off with a squall beat broaching. Heaving to in heavy weather preserved crew and canvas, and kept the dead reckoning plot from bleeding error. A ship that panicked in weather lost its place. A ship that slowed on purpose kept it. To feel these methods in motion, a day aboard a pirate sloop can be imagined in calm detail. Dawn draws a pale line along the east. The wind is fair, a small-boned trade that combs the sea into low lines. The helmsman keeps the compass card steady on a heading just abaft the beam wind. The officer of the watch checks the traverse board. Pegs line the first ring for the first half hour. Course west by south. Speed 4 knots. The glass is turned. The smell of boiled porridge drifts from the small galley. A boy on the foredeck watches flying fish jump and points to a seam of seaweed. An older sailor nods and looks to leeward, confirming the current line's direction. The log is hove. The chip sits in the water like a small anchor while line slips through fingers. There is a count during the glass's run, and speed is announced, perhaps a hair under 4. The officer shifts a peg to mark the change. By mid-morning the swell feels more even, and the ship's motion steadies. The master checks the cross-staff for damage, and rubs a smear of soot on an edge to cut glare. Noon approaches. A quick wash of the instrument's scale removes salt. The sun climbs, and the observer begins to take readings. A sailor holds a slate and chalk, recording angles called out in a neutral voice. The numbers grow, pause, and fall. When the maximum is agreed upon, the observer steps to the shade and works with a small table. The declination for the day is known, captured from an almanac or copied months ago from some learned book, and the latitude is computed. The master smiles. The ship has held the intended band within a handful of miles. The number is carried to the dead reckoning plot on the chart. A small correction to north-south is made, and the course for the afternoon is confirmed. Afternoon brings watercolor changes that raise the mind's eyebrow. The deep clear blue takes on a tinge that suggests a shelf is nearer than it was. Out comes the lead line. Soundings show a gentle rise from 40 fathoms to 32, then 30. The tallow returns with pale sand. The master scratches a note on the slate, white sand, at 30 fathoms. A memory says that a certain bay begins to show such sand at these depths. Several leagues out, the breeze freshens slightly, and the rigging hums a little higher. A tern glides past, then a pair. Far ahead, a puff of stationary cloud sits over a point of land that should be on this latitude. The dead reckoning track and the signs agree. Confidence grows, not bravado, just confidence. Evening softens the light and makes silhouettes of anything that sticks above the water. If a target is being followed, this is the hour for careful distance. A pirate crew in pursuit keeps its profile low and its lanterns hooded. The compass still tells the heading, but the sky adds lines to steer by. A familiar bright star floats a hand's width above the bowsprit. Keeping it just so holds the course. Surf on a reef barks a regular note, and the distance can be guessed by how sharp that note sounds. The helm eases a point to avoid an unseen shoal suggested by sound. The watch changes with the bell, and the traverse board pegs march around their circles. The pattern is the ship's heartbeat. Now step away from the familiar Atlantic and look at currents with stronger character. The Gulf Stream's western wall can be sharp. A ship sailing north in its core sees speeds that feel like a gift. A ship crossing it, eastward, watches the set carry it away from its intended line like a leaf on a river. The experienced master plans the cross, aiming up current to arrive on time and on course. The Agulas, off southern Africa, does another trick. It can stack steep, ugly waves when a strong wind opposes it, turning an ordinary blow into a lesson in seamanship. Good navigators do not let pride talk them into such a region at the wrong hour. They wait, or they choose another path. In the Pacific, travelers read swells that ran for thousands of miles and used island clouds as road signs. Pirates rarely worked far out into the Pacific's giant spaces, but the same logic ruled anywhere the sea had lanes and season. The toolbox also included memory devices beyond boards and slates. Crew trained by repetition turned the watch system into a living recorder. Each half hour had a task. Each task had a voice. The lead was hove at a set call near coasts. The glass turned with a hand trained to feel when the sand thinned and ran. A petty officer at the board could, if asked, recite the last watch's courses and speeds without looking. In a vessel where many could die from a single casino of rocks at night, this memory was not a luxury. It was the difference between legend and loss. Discipline, the quiet kind, made low-tech navigation work. Sometimes pirates won a battle before sails were even hoisted. Interrogated logs, taken from prizes, revealed routes and watering places. A captured pilot sealed the advantage. A short sentence spoken on a quiet deck. Keep the headland at 3 points off the starboard bow until the soundings fall to 12. Then bear up for the river mouth could be worth more than a dozen gunners. There are accounts of prisoners who guided ships through complex channels under promises of pay, threats, or both. In those moments, navigation was neither art nor science alone. It was human exchange, urgent and risky. When myths and reality are compared, Simple corrections help. The sextant, with its precise mirrors and arc, belongs mostly to a later era. Many pirates used earlier devices and were happy with the practical accuracy those could offer. The famous eye patch story, that one eye was kept dark adapted for night fighting, sounds tidy and cannot be proved widely. Night adaptation does help, but the patch has many other explanations. As for sailing by feel, the phrase should be taken literally. Feel in the helm, the pressure of wind, the rise and fall of a swell, the tremor of a shoal under the keel, the tone of surf. This is not magic, it is trained sensation. Errors deserve as much respect as successes, because the sea is generous with reminders. Dead reckoning accumulates error as surely as a dripping deck fills a bucket. A ship can miss an island by a dozen miles and then spend a day wasting water and tempers looking for it. A reef can rise where a chart promised none, because storms move the sand that made the protection a century ago. A channel can be wrong for a ship drawing a foot more than the book assumed. Fatigue turns a half-degree steering error into miles of drift by midnight. Pride is worse. A master who refuses to slow for soundings near an unknown coast invites a long crunch with witnesses. The recovery stories are simple when told with humility. Heave to until morning, run off to the open sea and reset the latitude. Sound carefully and take cross bearings until the land speaks an unambiguous name. After damage, careen and repair at the first safe beach. The day continued. Rolls on deck were clear. The master set the course and supervised the navigation. The pilot, if present, handled coasts and channels with local skill. The quartermaster kept order among the crew and managed stores and discipline. In some crews, this role shared power with the captain in matters of course. The helmsman steered, taught by feeling the rudder and learning how to keep a heading without weaving. The leadsman stood by the chains, singing numbers into wind. Apprentices learned by doing, standing near the officer who sighted the sun and soaking up the method along with the spray. There were no degrees offered. There was responsibility offered. Those who took it became the next generation of keepers of the board and the glass. The hourly rhythm, when described straight, sounds like a lullaby because of its regularity. The half-hour glass empties, the bell strikes once, the course is called, and the peg set. The log line is hove at the appointed hour, counted by fingers, speed noted. The bell strikes twice. The lead is read at the approach to a coast, and a voice sings, and a quarter less 5, meaning 4 3/4 fathoms. The bell climbs to 8 at the end of the 4-hour watch. The pegs are gathered. A neat hand transcribes the totals to a slate that sums the run. Another glass, another bell. This is a ship's black box long before electronics, redundant, audible, communal, and nearly impossible to fake under the eyes of a crew that depends on it. Case studies give bones to the method. Imagine a short Caribbean strike and escape. A sloop lies hidden behind a low quay, while a target convoy stands along the windward side of an island chain. The sloop's master knows the trade wind's character and the way a current curls around the chain. At dusk, the sloop slips out on a heading that will keep the island silhouette a finger's width above the starboard bow, using a bright star to hold the line. Soundings are taken at intervals to ensure the route crosses a safe saddle between reefs. The log line confirms a steady 4 knots. Just before midnight, the lookout hears surf bark on the outer reef, and the helm eases 2 points to skirt it. Toward dawn, a faint smell of smoke rides the air. Fires on a distant shore or tar boiling on a deck. The sloop alters course by a small measure, and by sunrise the convoy's rearmost ship lies ahead and to leeward. The sloop's position is no accident. It arises from DR, smell, sound, star lines, and several dozen pegs whispering their arithmetic. Consider a monsoon-timed raid. A crew has waited weeks in a quiet inlet, mending sails and trading in a small port where news arrives on dow decks. The wind begins its seasonal turn. The color of the sky, the tilt of clouds, and the tone of morning breezes confirm the calendar better than any parchment. A captured pilot is promised pay for safe entry to a bay where rich targets water and load. The instructions are clear. Keep a certain headland at a certain bearing until the lead reads 10 fathoms. When the watercolor turns pale green, bear up into the bay on a mark between two palms that line with a brown shoulder on a hill. The raid succeeds without waste. One might call it cunning. It is navigation's quiet cousin, local literacy. A long repositioning leg from one ocean to another shows the limits and strengths of low-tech navigation. The ship leaves an island with a known position. The DR runs for days and is cleaned at noon by latitude sights, whenever clouds allow. Swell lines give a hint of progress across wind belts. Birds disappear for a few days and then reappear, telling the ship it is nearing a chain. Watercolor shifts. A line of clouds sits over what must be warm land. Soundings begin in the 30s and climb to the 20s. The lead brings up shell. The master checks the old notes. At these depths and this latitude, a certain bank should be near. The first line of surf is heard not as a danger, but as confirmation. The ship has crossed a long plain of water and arrived not by miracle but by stubborn arithmetic and patient eyes. Modern reconstructions, done by sailors who choose to navigate the old way, have shown how accurate DR plus simple celestial can be when handled with practice. Over a day, errors of a handful of miles are common. Over a week, larger fatigue makes worse numbers. Teamwork makes better ones. The lesson is not that old methods outshine new. It is that seamanship is a culture as much as a technology, where crews maintain routines, watch error as a living opponent, and respect their environment. Low-tech navigation remains surprisingly reliable. Exploring this topic in the world today means museums and archives rather than prizes and chases. Instruments sit in cases, cross staffs with wear polished into the wood, back staffs with sharp, neat shadows, quadrants with arcs scarred by use, log reels with cords darkened by tar, pilot books, hand-copied and smudged, share instructions in voices that sound both plain and poetic. Steer west until the water puts on a greenish hue, then a little southerly for the mouth of the river. Replica ships sometimes sail with period methods to teach crews the rhythm. Respect for maritime heritage laws keeps wrecks and sites safe. These visits are not about romance alone. They are about acknowledging a human skill set that turned the world from uncertainty into something navigable. A verdict begins to form, even before the final words are spoken. Pirates did not need gadgets to turn the ocean into a readable map. Dead reckoning provided the spine. Celestial sights and nature's signals served as reality checks. Charts and captured knowledge offered shortcuts. Discipline, quietly enforced by routine, was the secret ingredient. The limits were real. Longitude wandered without a chronometer. Weather hid the sun. Currents lied to the eye. But the system worked often enough to change the balance of fear at sea. Empires built ships. Crews built methods. This hour will close by pulling all threads to one final image. But before that image arrives, one more steady scene belongs in the mind. A small vessel moves on a night sea smooth as a tabletop. Ahead, a bright star hangs just to the right of the bowsprit. A helmsman with steady hands keeps it there, nudging gently when the swell wants to wander. The ship seems alone, yet it is in company, with currents snaking under the keel, with birds sleeping on the wing a league away, with the slow breathing of warm land too far to see, with an invisible grid of latitude lines that the crew holds by habit. The compass whispers degrees, the glass sighs into its lower bulb. The bell counts another step in the night staircase. Nothing dramatic happens. A course is kept. A small correction is made. An error is admitted and then removed. This is how a blank ocean becomes a road. Night sailing gave navigation a gentle kind of power. A crew who knew the sky could let a bright star act like a compass. Rose hung in the dark. In northern waters, Polaris behaved like a steady friend. Farther south, other stars took the role. Sirius low and brilliant in winter. or a pair of bright southern stars holding a line. A helmsman learned to keep one star half a hand above the bowsprit, or at the tip of a backstay, and by doing so kept the ship on course without staring down at the compass every minute. Lanterns stayed hooded, voices stayed low. The only loud sound belonged to the sea around the hull. If oars were used, they were muffled with rags where wood met thole. Sail was shortened to just enough cloth to keep steerage way. The target's masts stood like pencil marks against the sky, and that faint outline told more about angle and distance than any speech. Surf on a distant reef clicked and sighed at a steady tempo, and the helmsman counted the seconds between crest and crash to guess how far the line of white lay. A careful listener could even hear the change in sound when the ship slipped from deeper water onto a shelf. Nothing in this routine was theatrical. It was quiet skill layered on quiet tools. Chases asked the navigator to think sideways. A pursuer with more guns and a longer hull might run faster on a straight course, but not every sea rewards straight lines. A quick-minded crew could look up at the telltales and down at the wake and choose a route that made the other ship clumsy, cutting across a pursuer's bad tack window, timing a turn so the enemy had to tack twice to follow. Stole miles for free. Shoal paths helped even more. A shallow draft sloop could pass over a bank that would have ripped the bottom off a deeper frigate if the tide ran strong near a river mouth. Arriving at slack water turned a dangerous bar into a thin, manageable step and left the heavier pursuer trapped outside in the chop. Some crews threw off false signals, lanterns dipped and raised among the quays, or a decoy fire set on a skerry to nudge the enemy into the wrong channel. The most effective trick was the oldest know the ground. A pilot who could say keep that crooked palm aligned with the ridge until the lead reads 10 had more stopping power than a dozen swivels. The capture of knowledge was a prize in itself. Forced pilots guided ships not just through reefs but through routines, where fishermen gathered at dawn, where guards grew lazy at noon, where currents tugged hardest under a fort wall. Interrogated logs told routes, watering holes, and the compass courses favored by fat merchantmen in fine weather. A humble line in a book: bear away 2 points until soundings lessen. The bottom white sand could lead to a rich anchorage without a shot fired. A prisoner's plain sentence: keep the red cliff at 2 points on the larboard bow until the church steeple lines with the notch in the hill could cut hours off the guesswork at night. Quick fact: in more than one tale, the boat that brought wealth aboard was not a boarding party, but a small launch carrying a pilot who knew the inlet that nobody else dared try. Myths make good posters, but weak lessons. The sextant, the elegant brass instrument that lets a navigator measure angles with high precision, belongs mostly to a later era than the one people picture when they hear the word pirate. Many crews at the height of pirate legend used cross staffs, backstaffs, and quadrants, and they did just fine for latitude. The famous eye patch and night vision story sounds neat. Real night adaptation helps, but a patch cannot stand in for training, patience, and silence. Maps were not decorated treasure scrolls with big red X's. They were working sheets, smudged with tar and sweat, corrected with pencil, where a bar had shifted after a storm. And sailing by feel never meant magic. It meant feel in the helm, feel in the heel of the ship as she leaned into a breeze, feel in the rhythm of waves against the planks, feel in the way a lead line tugged as it touched gravel or slid in mud. The real legend is competent. Mistakes, when they came, had a familiar shape. Dead reckoning accumulates. Error, the way a deck accumulates dew, quietly, drop by drop. 1 degree off in steering can move a ship a mile off course every hour. A current unrecognized can shove a track sideways until by evening the intended landfall sits where the eye swears the sea is empty. Fog turns cliffs into rumor. A helmsman, tired from double watches, weaves a fraction, and a fraction becomes a mile, and a mile becomes the wrong channel. Pride magnifies all of this. A captain who refused to heave to for soundings near an unfamiliar coast sometimes heard too late the long gravelly scrape that means the keel has found the bottom's truth. Recovery demanded the same calm. The error lacked. Heave to at once. If in doubt, run off into safe water and reset the latitude by noon sun when it returns. Put out boats to kedge, carry an anchor ahead in a launch, drop it, and haul the ship off inch by inch with the capstan while she floats on a rising tide. Lighten the hull if needed. Move guns inward, pump bilge, throw spare ballast overboard, and when free, resist the itch to prove courage. Take soundings, mark bearings, start again. It is better to arrive late than to arrive splintered. Crews divided navigation labor in a way that made the ship a little city. The master commanded the course and the big choices. The captain, on a pirate vessel where power could be shared, managed action and authority. The pilot, when one sailed aboard, became the voice of the coastline, and his word on shoals carried more weight than a roar from the quarterdeck. The quartermaster watched stores in fairness and often had a say in where to run. Since a lean larder makes even brave men cautious, the helmsman drove the ship with a pair of hands trained to think ahead of the rudder. The leadsman stood in the chains and sang numbers with a long pole's cadence in his voice. Apprentices ran, fetched and watched and learned by standing near those who did important jobs with unimportant expressions. The whole deck formed a single listening instrument at dawn and dusk. In that orchestra, nobody was a soloist for long. The watch rhythm gave the day its bones. Half-hour glasses turned. Bells struck the count. 1, 2, 3, up to 8. Then the watch changed. Dog watches in the evening, 2 short watches shifted the pattern so no crew kept the same hours every day. Heave the log, mark the board, turn the glass. Became a heartbeat. A sailor on the board pushed pegs in a simple, reliable code only his shipmates needed to read. If a squall rushed in, the rhythm bent but did not break. Shorten sail, keep steerage, feel the wind's edge, keep the pegs moving. When the squall passed, a calm could be just as busy, for a glass that measures nothing demands attention too. The point of the rhythm was not ceremony. It was memory. When a ship holds a memory, she forgives more human error. A full pursuit and escape can be traced with these tools alone. Picture a merchantman fleeing downwind toward a strait and a smaller raider shadowing in the dusk. The merchantman makes speed but draws deep. The raider cannot match speed on open water, but knows a bank that splits the strait, a bank with a saddle of safe depth running like a buried bridge between 2 shoals. The raider bears off early to reach the saddle on a line learned from a pilot's book. Keep the low point on the headland, just at the starboard cathead. When the lead brings white sand, haul up. Soundings confirm the approach. 18 fathoms, then 15, then 12, then a gentle rise to 9 and no less. The raider crosses. The merchantman is forced to go around. In that slow hour, the distance vanished. The raider emerges on the other side, now to windward and in position to choose the next turn. No cannon had to be fired to win the geometry. The sea does the arithmetic for the patient. A second case rests on monsoon timing. A pirate crew hides for weeks behind a low island, repairing rigging and boiling tar, while trading bits of cloth and stories with local fishers. The air changes, morning smells shift, and the afternoon sky lays a thicker, taller cloud over warm land. Old hands nod. The pilot says the bay downwind will soon fill with ships waiting for the first fair wind to carry them north. 3 days, he says, and the stream begins. The crew prepares. When the wind turns, it turns clean. The raider sails at evening, letting the land breeze carry it off the beach and into the new monsoon's hand. The course to the bay is not guessed. It is recited. Steer north-northeast until the stars rise at the foremast stay. When the lead reads 20, look for a lace of pale water on the surface. That is the river's stain, and the bay's mouth is 2 points beyond it. At dawn, sails appear and the chase begins with both sides already knowing how it will end. Wind was the calendar. Tide was the clock. The pilot's mouth was the map. A third study crosses weeks instead of hours. A crew needs to reposition from one island group to another far to the east. They leave at dawn with a known latitude. The next 10 days fall into a simple pair dead reckoning by day and night, and a noon sun check whenever clouds permit. Sometimes the sight is rough, sometimes it is not possible, sometimes it is perfect. Each good number pulls the latitude back to the plan. On days when the sea turns steel blue and the swells lengthen in a way that whispers of wide water ahead, the master alters course by a half point to correct a set he has felt in the helm for 3 watches. Birds leave the sky for 2 days and then return, flying purposefully at dusk toward a place just aft of the beam. The water turns a friendlier green. At 30 fathoms, the lead comes back sticky with fine mud. The master has seen that recipe before. The ship slows at evening. Soundings fall to 20, then to 15, then pick up to 18 as the ship slides along a shelf's outer edge. At midnight, a single dark block on the horizon tells the truth, and by dawn the new island lies downwind. The repositioning leg is not a string of tricks, it is a chain of small confirmations. Modern sailors who choose to navigate the old way on training ships and replica vessels often report that the most surprising lesson is not how well the methods work, but how calmly they require people to think. Over a day, dead reckoning plus a noon sight can keep a ship within a few miles of where reason says it should be. Over a week, error grows, but so does the comfort with watching error and trimming it away. When the crew is tired, error grows more quickly. When the watch rhythm holds, error shrinks. When one mind insists on being brilliant, error grows again. When the job is shared, error recedes. These are not romantic conclusions. They are the kinds of notes found in logbooks. Overcast, no noon sight, held latitude by DR, adjusted for set felt in helm, landfall next morning as planned. The result is not an argument against modern devices. It is a reminder that seamanship is older and broader than any gadget. For anyone drawn to learn more, the world offers places where the past sits within arm's reach. Instruments, simple and beautiful, rest in cases with their edges darkened by use. Cross staffs with modest scars that tell of hot hands and bright days. Back staffs with clean shadow lines. Quadrants with arcs touched 1,000 times by fingers stained with pitch. Old pilot books contain lines without flourish that carry whole coasts in a sentence. If the water is of a brownish cast, you are too near the bar. Haul a point to seaward. Replica ships sometimes let visitors watch a noon sight taken in the old way. And the observer's quiet, that will do, feels like a small chord played in tune across 3 centuries. Quick fact, maritime heritage laws protect wrecks and archaeological sites because careless curiosity can undo in minutes what the sea protected for lifetimes. Respect is not a speech. It is a choice to look and leave. The verdict on how pirates truly navigated the so-called void can now be spoken plainly. Dead reckoning formed the spine of the method, steady, continuous, and honest about its own limits. Celestial checks, mostly at noon, reset the north-south error whenever the sun allowed. Nature reading added texture, swells, birds, watercolor, the smell of land, and the way clouds built over warm ground. Charts, pilot books, and captured knowledge acted like shortcuts through complexity, and sometimes they mattered more than canon. Timekeeping by glass and bell ran the ship and made the log line speak in simple, useful numbers. Discipline was the quiet secret that made all of this better than the sum of its parts. The ocean was not empty. It was covered in writing, soft writing, yes, and in a script that only steady eyes could read, but writing all the same. A calm ending fits best. Imagine one last night watch. The sea is long and low. The sky is clean. A star sits just where the helmsman wants it, and he keeps it there. By easing the wheel the way a hand eases a horse's reins, the master steps up, not to change anything but to listen, to the whistle of wind in the leeches, to the small rattle near the quarter that says a block needs oil in the morning, to the way the wake curls off the stern with a hint of side drift that the next peg on the traverse board will correct. Far to leeward, lightning walks a far-off horizon without sound. Closer in, The dark says nothing about land, yet the smell carries a soft rumor of green things. The bell counts another half hour, measured and old. The glass turns. The peg moves. The road across the water stays open because the people on it pay attention. A brief recap closes the circle without raising the voice. With patience, pattern reading, and teamwork, pirates turned empty ocean into a readable map. They did it with a compass, a board with pegs, a knotted line, a glass of sand, a length of lead on a rope, a handful of angles taken under the sun, and the habits that make small errors smaller. Empires built ships with thick sides and big names. Crews in small vessels often beat them to a prize because the sea forgives attention and punishes noise. A thank you goes, in a steady tone, to those who keep these methods alive, to sailors who teach, to curators who care for fragile wood and brass, to writers who resist the urge to gild a plain truth, and to listeners who prefer understanding to legend. No gadgets, just seamanship. The ocean was never empty to those who knew how to read it.